Welcome everyone to episode 42 of the Malt Strategy Podcast. I'm your host Jean, the Strategy Wargamer, and with me is my co-host Eric, TortugaPower, and today we have a special guest. We have Philippe from AGEOD, the developers behind the recently released Field of Glory 2 Empires, a grand campaign strategy game set in the Roman era.
Philippe, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan of AGEOD. You guys made my favorite Civil War game ever made, so I am indebted to you guys forever.
I am honored. Yeah, so you know well AGEOD, in fact.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, when did you join AGEOD? When did you first come on board?
Oh, AGEOD was created in 2004 by Philippe and myself, Philippe Malacher. So AGEOD from the start was made of two persons, and I was right there from the start. In fact, the history of AGEOD is a bit hectic because we created this small development studio with Philippe in 2004, and then we did produce a few games. The first one of importance was the American Civil War, the first American Civil War, because we made two games, and the very first one was the birth of America, in fact, in 2004. And then in 4 years later, in 2008, we had a bit of issues, so we ended up being part of Paradox for a few years. And then,
oh, really?
Yeah, we worked
I didn't know
Paradox. That. Yeah, for 3 years we were. We were actually Paradox friends for 3 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and then in 12, we went back to being independent. Let's not dive too much into this part. And since then, we are with Slytherin, and it has been 7 years now that we are AGEOD, but a company of the Slytherin Group. And that's the history of AGEOD. And in these 15 years or so, we managed to produce at least 15 games, perhaps slightly more. Yeah, 3 years ago, we started our first game on the new internal engine of Slytherin, which is Archon engine. And the result is Empires.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, but before we kind of do, I wanted to just find out a little bit more about you. So, what inspired you to start developing strategy games? Was it a lifelong ambition?
Yeah, no, not really. At the very beginning, you mean 15 years ago, or?
Yeah, like when you decided it in 2004 to hey, I want to do this.
Oh yeah. So you want a bit of history about me?
Yeah, I always like to find out a little bit why, I want to find out more about you, why you are so passionate about making strategy games.
Okay, strategy games and not history game. It's a good, it's a big difference. Yeah. So I have always been in strategy gaming since my teenage. So I started with my older brother playing board game and war games, and big one. I don't know if you have some background in board gaming, pen and paper board gaming, but the Europa series, you had SPI games, Avalon Hill, all these old games. Some were just big and just too huge to handle, in fact. So when the computer started to develop, I naturally started to program my first strategy games. When I say naturally, perhaps I had an inclination to program. And when I was always a player of strategy games on computers, and Philippe in around 2000 started to produce his first computers games, like Great Invasion or Pax Romana. So we are talking of games 20 years ago, and I became the moderator of his forum. And when things did not go that well for these two games, we saw we had an opportunity to work together. and he's really an history buff, much better than me on history. So I started to be the coder, but also, let's say, the technical game designer. So we were a good team with Philippe because he had some good historical knowledge. He spoke with me of some historical topics, and we saw together how to make that into a nice game design and nice game mechanism. So it started this way, me as the coder, but also the designer of the technical part, and it went like that for a few years. But yeah, I have always been in strategy gaming at some point in my life. But I was not especially on history games, and that's why I said it's an important difference, because I like playing sci-fi, heroic fantasy, historical games also. I don't have a favorite genre, in fact. And so I could have done a sci-fi game instead of Empires, actually, if Slytherin wanted that. But you know how life turn out. When you start doing something, people want you to keep going, doing these kind of things, because they think, and they might be right, that you are very good, or at least you know your stuff. So 10 years of AGEOD later, when we always did historical games, naturally I had to do another historical game. But for me, I would like perhaps some breath of fresh air in the future, in a few years, and actually do I don't know, a sci-fi game. This would please me very much. So that's it. Yeah.
If you're looking for a good sci-fi game, may I suggest we need a good Star Trek strategy game, because it's been years. So if you can make that dream come true.
There are some good license around, yes. And I have my favorite titles, so it's but I prefer not to speak too much about it. Yeah.
As long as you guys continue developing strategy games, I'm happy, because when you mentioned earlier Birth of America, like that was the first, I would say, American Revolution game that I really enjoyed. I mean, like when I was a kid, there was Koei, which was like, I think a Japanese company, and they made Liberty or Death.
Oh yeah, Koei. Yeah.
Like since then, I've been trying to find like a really great like American Revolution game, and there have been some, but none of them measured up until I ran into Birth of America, and I was like, holy shit, this game is awesome. Like, and then you guys came out with Wars in America, which took it up a notch, and that one is like by far one of the best, actually the best American Revolution game that I've played, because honestly, like the awesome thing about it is, like when I go into that game, I actually feel like George Washington, because like the first thing I usually do is I send an expedition out to Canada, and the cool thing is, like, so many things affect my troops going up. Half the time, it would take them a long time if it's winter and stuff like that. So many factors come into play. I love that.
Yeah. It's true that we did I believe we have some skill in showing the hardness of war, the grim reality, and the difficulty of supplying, and all this kind of stuff. And in our games, it's rather well portrayed, indeed, but it makes them also a bit more grognard for too much for many people. So this was the downside. Also, the AGEOD game, we perhaps were too grognard on some aspects. But yeah, it means that for the people who like this kind of realism, it's great.
Yeah, I think it's great too. I actually think that we need people like you who are willing to kind of, I mean, in a way, you're willing to sacrifice sales because of your passion to do the game you want to do. And there's people out there who really want to play something so down in the weeds that it's modeling things that most people aren't interested in, but there's people who really are interested in all that. And thank you for being one of the few people who is able to bring us those kind of games.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's also one of the reason why we were independent only 5 years, because the sale did not follow that much. Because it's nice to please a few thousand players, and this was the kind of game we wanted to make. But at some point, you also need to continue living off your passion. So it's a hard balance.
Yeah.
So I kind of piggybacking off that. So I noticed like there's a difference between the previous games that you made, like Civil War 2, Birth of America 2, and Field of Glory Empires.
Yeah.
First, it's a completely different engine, I feel. And it's I feel like it's a little bit less grognard, as you were mentioning.
I admit, and definitively, it's less grognard. It's a conscious decision.
You guys intentionally did that.
Yeah, definitively, it's the intent. Yeah.
How would you maybe describe the game to people who are listening to this podcast and for some reason didn't catch our last one? So I'm kind of curious to actually see how you would describe this game to other people.
It's historical strategy game and not a war game. We were doing war game as AGEOD mainly. And now you get a blend of Civilization meets our former games or some of Paradox Games gameplay. So it's at the core, it's a strategy game, and that's it. No,
I see.
No grognardization.
What inspired you to develop Field of Glory Empires? Because you guys were making a lot. I mean, I felt like you guys were kind of concentrating mainly on, like, I would say 18th century to modern day with, World War One. What inspired you to go to the Roman times?
Again, sometimes you do with the constraints and the limitation, and part of the reason was that we restart on a new engine, the Archon engine, and you might have noticed also for AGEOD that we started with games not too complex, and then we ended up with a more complex game like Pride of Nation, which was showing the limit of the engine, by the way. And so when you build up a code base or an engine, if you want to do things right, or at least this is what we thought, you can start with a too complex project like I am building from scratch the ultimate World War II game. For us, it was doomed to fail. So we started with a rather simple game like Birth of America, and then we build up on it. And it's a bit the same process for the Archon engine. We started from almost nothing except the display and rendering part provided by Archon. And we did not fail to do a modern era game or Napoleonic game with it yet. It does not mean that we won't do it. It means that it was more prudent and more efficient to go with simple warfare style of game. And this is one of the reasons. The other one is that our previous game on the Roman Empire and ancient civilization was Alea Iactaes, and it was at least 6 years ago, I believe. So we felt we could do something better, slicker, faster, and that's it. Yeah. It's also part of constraints that make you choose a topic. It's not just putting something off thin air and deciding you do it. No, it's not like that, generally, for us at least.
Ah, okay. And I know the previous engine that you had, you used in multiple games, from like the Birth of America to Rise of Prussia to, the 30 Years War, I believe, that you guys had. Mm-hmm. So is this new engine that you have in Field of Glory, is this a brand new engine from the ground up, or did you refine the older engine?
It's completely new because it has been developed by Slytherin, and so at first it did not share anything with our old engine, and so I had to code and recreate from zero all the basic gameplay and then the gameplay rules for Empires. So yes, it's a complete restart for us. It shares.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, just saying that you also learn from experience when you are on the same job, and I know I do better fast and faster now in 2019 compared to my start. And for example, take the AI. The AI in the old AGEOD engine was decent, but was slow. Like you need 2 or 3 minutes to have it play his turn. Now you get the same result in the same result in a skill in Empires, but the AI runs in 10 seconds. Just because you learn from what you do in your job, and it's good to restart from fresh sometimes.
Yeah, I've experienced that in my own job.
Oh, clearly. Yeah, clearly.
Anytime you do programming, just you learn so much along the way, and it's way too much time to start over from scratch. But when you are forced to, you have this opportunity really to do everything the way you think it should have been done to begin with.
Yeah.
But I wanted to follow up on this as well, because I remember playing Civil War II a lot, and I also played To End All Wars. And I really felt even the difference between these two games. I felt like Civil War II, maybe because it was the first time I was learning an AGEOD title, that it was appropriate. And so few people are doing Civil War games, strategy games, that you really don't even care. You overlook anything to be able to play a strategy game in that theater.
Yeah, and some players told me it's weird that you need some French to do a good American Civil War game. It was
yeah, it's very strange. Actually, now that you mention it, I hadn't thought about it, but
it's a bit strange.
Yeah, it's at least remarkable. But so in To End All Wars, I even I played that only recently, and it was one of the last games you guys did in the last engine.
Yeah.
Even then, I really felt like the engine was very much so showing its age. I mean, especially because just contemporary titles, and there are other contemporary titles. I think you guys released it just in time for the 100th anniversary, and there was other. Was the other one that was released, Commander of the Great War, and I mean, this it's just
no, definitively, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the other games, you really start to feel that this engine is old. And so
because Commander of the Great War was much simpler, but To End of All War was pushing the limit of what the engine could do in terms of calculation. Also, so it was not simply the graphics; it was also that it was the time to say goodbye to the old lady, the old engine, and start fresh, because there were so many units at some points, and because in the old AGEOD game you had the armies and the units were made of sub-elements. And so when you look at the French division, for example, in fact it's made of also 12 subunits, and the computing to handle and calculate stuff about thousands upon thousands of subunits was killing the engine in the end, because we could not have done a World War II games with the old engine, because just too much to process, and it was not efficient enough. And so it was time to stop with it.
And not only just the fact that the engine itself couldn't handle it, but I think the simplicity in this redone, this Field of Glory Empires, it's a game that I could pass on to my friends who aren't even into these niche wargaming strategy, whatever, the very grognard type games. This is a game which I would consider it almost the same definition as yours. Civilization meets the Total War, Rome Total War, meets Europa Universalis. You find some kind of mesh point between those three, and those are all games. Any of those three games are something that you could recommend to people before you would recommend something as deep and complex as a previous AGEOD title.
Yeah, true. Yeah, because we did check and evaluate what we wanted and what we should add. and everything you add, even if it's fun or add some realism, has a cost for the player in complexity. So you also need to take a hard look on when you find a cool idea or you believe, we should do that because it's realistic to have that. Then you have to also to consider, is it worth it in terms of complexity? And the AGEOD engine was we did not care a lot about that, and we did add for 15 years mechanism upon mechanism of stuff, and in the end, yes, it was very complex. So yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask is, when did you start developing the engine, and like what key pieces did you want to keep from the old engine in terms of like features and capabilities?
You know, you have some basics you want to keep. I don't know how I decide what I want to keep. Perhaps it's just experience speaking. Like for the supply system, I did not want something abstract or just too exploitive. So we did use something which is very close from Birth of America. You have supply points in region, and then the units draw upon on them, and you can still be resupply if you are adjacent to the region. This kind of stuff. It's an old idea from our game. It's not the most complex system we did on supply, but yes, somehow you probably because of your experience, you know it will work okay. It will be realistic enough, but not too complex. And yeah, you know it will fit it will be the right piece of the puzzle of the stuff of the whole project. So you know what to drop and what to keep and what to improve. Difficult to say how you decide. It's
How long were you developing this engine for? Was it like did it take a couple of years?
3 years actually. I started in 2016 to work on Empire with the Arcan engine. So at first it was not Empires. When you start, it's funny because I still have the third version. It was you had a map of Africa with 10 regions and a tank moving, and this was the extent of Empires because it was just to show that Arcan engine would allow you to click on something and move it to another region, and that's it. And from that, you do everything else. But it's good because the Arcan engine handle what I dislike, because I like to code game rules and I like to game design, but for the rest, I'm not very much interested into knowing what is the shader I should use or how to optimize rendering. That's not my... what I want is a mean to do good games, and that's it. So I let that to other people now, and it's good because I can concentrate on what I like and hopefully do best.
There's this interesting mechanic in Field of Glory Empires that you guys compare this somehow with Field of Glory 2.
Mm-hmm.
At what point in the development did you guys realize this? Was this always the plan from the very beginning, or is it something that at some point you realized this would pair well, or maybe I can't remember the Field of Glory 2 developer's name.
It's Richard Bodley Scott.
Richard, yeah, thank you.
RBS.
Thank you. Did Richard realize this, or somebody at Slytherin, or?
It's I believe it has been in the first year. It was not from the start. We did not have the idea from the start, but we at Slytherin we do a convention every summer when we meet with all the developers of Slytherin, and while exchanging, flinging ideas, yes, we did talk with Richard and Ian, also the boss of Slytherin, and we said, why not? It will be a really nice thing if we could somehow mesh the two games together with a tactical part for those people who want that. It's in development since a long time, but it was not there from the very start, at least.
Wow, that's really cool that you guys just got together and were like, hey, let's just do this.
Yeah. And it was rather bold because we really did not know how it would fit together, because it's two games. and this is also why probably we got a bit of flack on release from people saying why the tactical part is not integrated fully into the strategic part, and we had to tell them again and again, guys, it's optional. You don't have to play tactical battles if you don't feel to, because the battle is in Empire is a nice system. And we had a bit of talking about that, but it did work well in the end.
I always consider it a bonus because, like, you buy Field of Glory Empires, and you can play the entire game from beginning to end, just doing strategic battles and focusing on basically growing your empire. But if you own Field of Glory 2, you were like, well, okay, you know what? I only have 2 units. They have 10 units. Let me see if I can still try to win this in the tactical side. And you just got more value out of it. So I'm sure there are people that are like, well, this should have been included. I always think like, hey, if you want that side, go pick up the game Field of Glory 2. I think Byzantine Games made that, right?
Yes, Byzantine Games is Richard Bradley Scott, in fact. It's the company name of the guy, of the developer. Yeah.
How difficult was the process to integrate the Field of Glory Empires with Field of Glory 2? Like, I can imagine that was not any kind of easy task because you're basically 2 entire separate games.
Yeah, and it won't be. It will never be integrated completely because you have two studios, two development team, and 2 code base also. Richard, when he programs, he has his own engine, in fact. So we will never be able to merge the 2 together. So people will always probably say it's much easier to do a battle in this game compared to this one, or I lost in this game. Why can I win so easily in the other? You will always get this kind of remarks, and so we did try to have the 2 works together. It went. No, I can't say it was that difficult because we have a conversion table between the units, and so you can easily fine tune and tweak that depending of the remarks of players, and then you have to make the 2 programs communicate between each other with each other. Sorry, so. Once done, it works, but it will be the extent of it. You won't see Field of Glory 2 into Empires completely. It will be always be 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this edition because this makes it, for people, I can really pitch this as truly, at least for people who have Field of Glory 2, this is truly the superior version of Rome Total War. Because it now gives you the tactical battle, which I feel like is probably Total War's selling point, is those tactical battles. And although the Field of Glory ones are not real time, they're probably done a little bit more grognardy. Mm-hmm. So for people who enjoy that, then there's that benefit.
Yeah. And perhaps, who knows, Richard will come with the possibility to make siege and assault on cities. So we will have that perhaps someday. I still hope. Don't quote me on that because I have nothing written on that, but I feel that will be nice, and I know Richard is very skilled, so I would not be surprised that he tries to do that in the future. That will be very nice.
He has plenty of scenarios with sieges in his games already, so at least from his standpoint, it shouldn't be too hard.
Yeah. So yes, that will be a nice complement to Empires also.
I was going to say, I personally don't use the tactical battles very much, not because I don't want to, but just because I don't have time to. So, if you're going to try to play one campaign as any nation, and let's say that you don't even plan to play it all the way the full 500 turns. And for those of you who don't know, it's 500 turns. It's a very long game you can play. And most...
Hopefully you can win before, but it's not a given.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say it even goes 200 turns. It takes a long time to go 200 turns, and one tactical battle can set you back like 3 hours.
Yeah, a big one, yes, definitely. And this is also one of the reasons where we did try, hopefully succeed also, to have a good and nice game system with some subtlety in empires about battles. It's not just, it's definitively not luck, even if it plays a role, and you have to consider several factors so you can win a battle. So yeah, we had remarks from people coming from the Fog 2 community saying, at first I only did Fog 2 battles, and then I did check in-game battle in Empires, and I now always do Empires battle, so it's nice.
Yeah, I agree, actually. It's okay, the system has that weird magic that it's both simple but feels real. That's always hard to get. I mean, normally, I would say even the AGEOD battles before this, I didn't understand always how the results were happening, and in this one I can see it.
This was a drawback.
So,
in the old AGEOD games, you had some reports, but it did not tell you what were the rules and how the rules turn defeat or victory. And now with Empires, you get everything on display, and if you want to understand your defeat or victory, you can, because everything is written in the battle simulation or replay. So, but many people just it's obvious when you read the forum. Many people just say I lost why, but they don't think of checking the math or the replay. They just don't want to dig into the details. They just say, I lost, it's unfair, or it's just a RNG. And so you have to explain them, no, it's certainly some room for improvement in your army composition, for example.
Yeah.
But it was a fun part when we started designing the units types. It was nice to try coming with a system where the heavy infantry is not always the queen of battle, and so that many different unit types have a role in battle, even if we can certainly improve a bit the cavalry now. But even skirmisher have a roles in battle in Empire, so it's nice.
How much work did you put into the game in terms of separating? I do notice that each country has its like own flavor and its own kind of, I would say, personality or kind of traits that it kind of goes by. There are some countries that are more aggressive than others. Other countries are more prone to trading and more, I would say, laid back. How much work did you put on that?
It's difficult because I am the one doing both the code and the game design. I alternate between tasks just to be more efficient and not get bored by doing the same thing for 3 days. So I would say perhaps 1/3 of the time will be on tweaking the data and adding content and game feature. But it's all mixed together because I am the sole, the only person on that. So I will add. I will read some historical articles on the internet, for example. Then I will think of a feature for a nation. I will add a few units, and then I will start. What if I add an event doing that? If you have this kind of building, it's all mixed together now for me because I am the one doing all the parts on that. So it's difficult to say sometimes. But it's very efficient because there is no communication delay between the game designer and the coder, so it's nice. and we both understand each other perfectly.
One other question that I had, since we were kind of like talking about Byzantine games a few minutes ago, how was like the experience working and coordinating with another studio? Because that's something that generally doesn't happen a lot in game development. Usually it's one studio developing a game. How was that experience where you had to work with another complete studio?
It went rather easily because we had several advantages, like we are both part of Slytherin, Richard and me, Richard for Byzantine Games and me for AGEOD. So we, for example, we did a lot of talking when we met in the convention in summer, for example. And also the other bonus, let's say, is that as the two games are not merged together, you each keeps his part, and you just have to discuss about the bridge, the link between the two games, but you don't have to integrate everything closely and follow every day what the other does. It's not working like that, and you don't need to do that. So yes, it went rather well. At some point, Richard is really an historical buff at the highest level, let's say. At some point, I gave him all the data about my units, and then he saw how to translate the unit types and statistics on his own game, and then we fine tune and we refine the process. But yeah, it was rather easy, in fact, in the end.
Wow.
So Richard strikes me as a person who really knows history well and probably has these numbers down. I imagine he's very confident in the values he's put into his engine. Did that feedback actually end up modifying any of the combat modifiers of your own units?
Yeah, because I'm not first and foremost an history buff, but more a guy who likes programming historical strategy games, not historical games only. Yeah, I know he's much more knowledge than me, so when he tells me this unit is not very historical, or it should probably phalanx, or Nubia did not add phalanx, this kind of stuff. Yeah, I change without issue because I know he's right. But on the other hand, we had the original design of Empires 3 years ago was to keep things simple. And so we decided that almost every nation would have light infantry, medium infantry, and heavy infantry. And so sometime you have to twist a bit history to keep this approach. Just because we are much more in the what if possibilities, like what if I don't know, Nubia goes Imperial and reform itself into a mighty advanced empire that will conquer all of Africa and Syria, for example. So we had to plan for this kind of hypothetical scenarios. And whereas Richard is doing an historical game, and only an historical game. So he was cool on that when I told him, yes, but I need to have this nation have heavy infantry. So think of what can it be, and tell me what type will fit. And yeah, he was cool on that also.
Well, there's one elephant in the room.
Tell me.
Your game came out around the same time as a former employer of yours.
I don't know what are you talking about.
I know. Well, let me just reveal the news to you. I'm sure you don't know.
No, really?
But
we did not notice we had competition. You must be mistaken.
I'm sorry. Let me just reveal this news to you then.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No, it must be a small company. I never heard of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, so everyone, the first thing people ask me, so I review games. I'm doing a series of Field of Glory Empires on my channel right now, and everyone asks me, the first thing they want to ask is, how does this compare with Imperial Rome? And the first thing I tell them is, they're different games to begin with, but they aren't satisfied with that. They know that's kind of a cop-out answer, and I'm kind of forced to talk about what I think of one versus the other. In fact, this was kind of one of the things we discussed as well in our podcast, specifically for Field of Glory Empires. So, actually, before we even talk about the two games themselves, when you guys realized that Paradox was making a game that would be in the same time period How did that impact anything?
I believe we first all said, "Oh shit," because
that's
let's be honest. Paradox has some significant oomph and momentum because they started strategy games, grand strategy games almost 20 years ago. So they have a huge following, and they have a budget also. We did know when we started 3 years ago that Paradox, as all business company, has to output new games regularly. So we did knew that it was possible that they will do a kind of Roman game. The other possibility was a Victorian game. I believe it will be the next, by the way. And
we hope. I don't think so, but we hope.
Okay, what will be your opinion? What will be the next game from Paradox if not a Victorian game?
I don't know, but I don't think that there's a market for Vicky 3.
Yeah?
I would say there's a kind of a lot of, I would say, anticipation for like a Cold War game, because that's like the only error that Paradox.
No.
Yeah, because
that's Sean. That's just Sean saying what he wants to have happen.
No, honestly, one thing that I think the historical gamer Matt was talking about it, because he was mentioning that the Paradox is going to announce something later this fall, and he was mentioning that they're going to hold their press conference or their announcement in an old Cold War. I would say building,
okay.
And
building?
like a bunker, I think, or like a radio station, something like that. And he was saying that's interesting that they're going to make an announcement at this location. I said, yeah, I didn't even consider that. I didn't even think about that, but he kind of picked it up, and so it's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, we can speculate, but I mean, do you think one way or another on that? I'm more interested in what you think about actual Imperial Rome, because that is a release game, and it's obviously a competitor for Field of Glory Empires. And I play it out. The script plays out in my head that when you heard that they were releasing this, you guys were probably a little bit nervous. Sounds like that's the case.
Sure.
But then there's also this moment when their game releases and it's not met with really that positive of a reception.
Yeah.
So I can imagine this as there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like here's a hope, an opportunity for Slytherin.
You have to be honest. You prefer your competitor don't fare that well initially. So it was. I would lie if I told you I'm sorry that they don't reach 90% on Steam.
Right.
But the two games are rather different in philosophy also. So perhaps anyway, many players prefer a game style to another. So there are many that are able to and want to try the two games, but some will only try one game because simply they prefer real time, or they want a solution to how easy it is to conquer the whole map, so they will instead prefer our game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say that your game on Steam is ranked very positive after with a few hundred reviews. So it's in terms of reviews, it's doing a lot better there. But I do feel like they're two different games, because like when I play Imperator Rome and when I play Field of Glory Empires, I do feel like there are separate games. I know they're in the kind of same time period, but I feel like I'll give you a good example. Like I was mentioning this in a previous podcast. I was saying that, when I want to do a long-term ancient Rome game, right? Like I would pick up and start Imperator Rome, because a game like that would take at least weeks, if not months, to finish from start to end. And I feel like with Field of Glory Empires, it can do both a quick and a fast gameplay session. And what I mean by that is like you can just start Field of Glory Empires and I feel like I could kind of finish it in a weekend or a week.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to, I can kind of staggered that out and actually play for months by playing every tactical battle, So like I feel with Field of Glory Empires, I can start an entire Rome game and finish beginning to end in a weekend, or I can kind of stagger it across months, where you really can't do that with Imperator Rome. You kind of have to go in for the long haul.
Yeah, because Paradox like to. I need to be cautious when I speak of Paradox.
Yeah.
But I will state the fact that they often believe that more is better. So they have a lot of it's called a province for what we call a region. So they have 10,000 game space or provinces, whereas we have 1,000 region. So the two games are completely different in their approach on a lot of things, and people will prefer one style over another, and probably there is some room for the two games to get at the same time.
And I feel like probably we haven't even really talked about Field of Glory Empires enough yet, because we've only talked really about the military, how it shares with...
Yeah, true.
But we haven't really talked about the mechanics in Field of Glory Empires, which I think deserve a moment of our attention, because we've alluded to it before, this balance between complexity, simplicity, realism, and, abstract. I feel like you guys have reached a new balance here, which I'm kind of curious, first of all, is this the direction you think that AGEOD is going in the future, more towards accessible game mechanics versus more complicated ones?
Yeah, definitively. We need to... It's difficult because you need to somehow streamline your game mechanism, but we don't want definitively to dumb down the gameplay. So it's difficult balance. The game was much simpler 3 years ago in its intent, and then after playing and seeing how beta testers react and what we felt we wanted, it went a bit more grog now, while still being quite accessible, we believe. But we don't plan to return to some of the, I will say, needless complexities of some of the game mechanism of AGEOD games, the previous era.
Oh, well, there's two in particular mechanics I think I'd like to ask about that may reveal a little bit of what's under the hood. Feel free to talk about as much or as little as you want. But first of all, the most obvious one is this CDR, the decadence, and the culture, and Empire's rising, Empire's falling. So I don't know how to really relate to this. I don't really know how to even talk about it other than to say that it seems to be somehow, I don't even understand how it does it, but it seems to really capture history well. So it's basically just ranking everyone based on a ratio of whether they're generating culture or, they have decadence, which I'm actually, frankly, I've put in a lot of hours in the game. I've really studied it, but I still don't fully understand how decadence is generated.
Okay.
There's something called size, it's a little nebulous, kind of reminds me of playing previous AGEOD games. I don't know what's going on.
I will just make a small aparté on that. It's a user interface, and it's never done. And we did put a significant higher number of hours working on the UI in Empire compared to the previous AGEOD games, and still it's never done. And clearly we should have done more on explaining the CDR with panels and windows and this kind of stuff. Yeah, but it's when you develop a game, probably user interface is 1/3, almost 50% of your time. It's crazy, and you see from players' reactions that you are not done, and they still find 50, 100 remarks and improvements to do, because it's never clear to everybody what you do. It's impressive, almost.
I mean, it has to be said though that this interface is it's like a gift from God compared to your previous titles. I don't want to say that because it's a little bit negative towards your previous ones, but this one it's like really almost, or maybe it is mainstream interface, which is very impressive.
Yeah, because the previous AGEOD game were all made by me for the programmation, including the interface. And so every day I had to struggle deciding, do I spend my day adding this cool game mechanism, or do I spend my day doing some user interface? And guess what? User interface developers, they really dislike that most of the time. And so for this project, the split was different with another person, and it was much easier to. I am focusing on game design and gameplay coding, and that's it. So it's and that's one of the main reasons. It's not that perhaps I am not the perfect guy on a user interface, but it was mostly lack of time in AGEOD that made the interface not that good, let's say. Yeah,
I see.
So yeah,
and the other mechanic that I mean, we didn't really even talk about that culture decadence one, but if you want to talk about it all, I don't know how you guys came up with this magic formula that it seems to work. I mean, you actually see empires rise and fall. You see the civil wars. It's kind of, to me, it's genius. I don't understand how it works, but it's genius.
It's like when you do some cooking, and you have done that since 15 years, and you have read books from others cook chief during 30 years. It's the equivalent for me for coding, playing games, and checking what the other do. And so you came with some kind of idea on how to, you have to capture that some empires can grow fast, and then they will have troubles, and the unrest will start to appear. So you try to get some formula and some plausible formulas that would simulate that. And it's a bit like cooking. You don't have a definitive process, but you work on that and you refine your idea. And but it's not, the first version is not perfect by far. You do it, and then you get the tester feedback, and then you rework, and you repeat that 30 times over 1 year, and then you get something that old. And what is important is that it should be historical, or at least plausibly historical, while being fun somehow. And you want to have both. If you have to choose, it's probably better to have a fun mechanism, but if you can do both historicity and fun, yes, it's much better. So yeah, that's the essence of it.
And the other, sorry, Jean, I'm kind of monopolizing. Do you have questions? Sorry to take up.
Yeah, I'm very interested about the exact thing that you're talking about, so feel free to keep diving in.
Okay, the other one. I really want to know about... So a lot of the things in the game make a lot of sense, and I mean, we could ask a little bit about how armies are made and all this, but I feel like it's a little bit more straightforward. Another of the things which is kind of interesting, I feel like there was a lot of decisions made on how this should go, was the trade stuff. Because this is, I think, under the hood, one of the more complicated things going on.
It can be.
How different places are trading, and how do you have, like, what resources are going where. And I think that there's a little bit... I haven't... See, the problem with me is I'm that guy who hasn't yet read the manual. But just using my kind of understanding of games from, previous experience, etc., I'm just kind of assuming that trade acumen dictates something about who gets what trade goods and stuff. That could be wrong.
Definitively, yes. It's trade acumen. Acumen is the measure of how easily you can... trade with others and snatch trades from others. So yeah, it's the most important parameter.
Okay, so I got that right. But so this is actually, I would say there's actually a lot going under the hood here. This is maybe intentionally left out of the player's hands. You don't control the trade routes.
Yes, it's definitely conscious decision to do that. Yes,
to save the player from it, right? But
so how does fun when you have free region, but when you are the Roman Empire, as I said, I don't know where. It's not a economic simulator. Zero AD. It's not that. So yeah, you don't want the player to spend 2 hours doing trade every turn.
Well, is it possible for you to talk a little bit about how you guys decide on the trade mechanics and any of the details of that?
Yeah, I believe at the very first, at the beginning, you start asking yourself what do you want and what you don't want. And what you don't want, well, one of the things we did not want was to have trade being manual, where you have to fiddle with a lot of transaction every turn. So when you have set in stone, so to speak, this constraint, you need to think of mechanism so that it's automatic, but not too dumb, or it must be automated, but you still need to provide some choices to the players. And true choices, not obvious one and no-brainer decision. So because trade was automated, you have to put the choices on the buildings somehow, because the buildings, the trade goods are used by population and buildings, so mostly buildings actually in the game, but in reality. So yeah, when you decide you automate trade, so it means you have to do something with buildings. So it's the gameplay is pushed toward optimizing buildings. And here also another thing I try to do is there is the old and just too often heard sentence, easy to play, hard to master. Something a sentence I don't much like because it's so cliche. But what I try also is you have this mechanism and you try to make it work for people who don't want to invest too much time or just don't want to bother. But you try to reward players that want to dig into it. And so for the buildings, which are intimately tied to trading, it's relatively easy to plop and build buildings and see that you need iron for this one and leather for this one. But if you want to go into more detail, you have the bonus trade goods. I don't know if you master this part of the game. And
I pay attention to it, yes.
And you can have the game works and probably win without taking care of bonus trade goods. But if you want to win at higher difficulty, or if you are a small nation and need to fight against Rome or Macedonia, yeah, you need to optimize and start to think how I can do better. So that's the point of the trade goods, the bonus trade goods. That it's the second level in game design of trade and building bonuses. Yeah, so it's a combination of knowing what you want, what you don't want, and staying plausible, or at least semi realistic, because you don't want to create mechanisms that have no link to reality. And it should be fun. And if you can do these 2 layers of complexity, it's even best. And that's the essence of the creation process for trading and building.
Great, thanks. That helps.
So one thing I wanted to ask, since we're kind of like going into all these systems, and we also mentioned the coordination with another studio, I wanted to ask, like, what's the most challenging aspect that you had when you were developing Field of Glory Empires? Like, what was the most thing that kind of stood out that required most of your attention?
Probably it's a tough one. What was my biggest problem?
You could take your time, because we can always just cut out empty space. And it seems like you answered it right away. Like, how did you know that?
No, as I said, I'm not especially a high-level history buff. I read and like reading history, but it's not my forte. Probably you are even better or more knowledge than me on several historical era. And so I have to read a lot and double check a lot the facts and understand things before I start going into game design, because I don't want to to do something that has no connection to reality, and history. So yes, it's time consuming, but it's very interesting anyway to read and watch stuff about the period of the game. So yeah, it's and it's nice also because when you start reading about a random country or nation, you start discovering facts, and you begin thinking of what gameplay I can do with that. What will be the custom approach or specific approach that no other country has because of this historical facts. And it's really the nice thing about game design. It's this kind of stuff also, trying to come with a very specific approach to a country or nation. And you might have realized that Empires is not fully historical on several things, like we have buildings which are clearly not historical in their effects. But because it's also a game, so there are some game mechanisms which are probably close to Seven Wonders, the card games. Perhaps you know these games of this game. Sometimes realism take a back seat on some game feature because it will be it's much more fun doing it another way. But we try to not push that too far.
That's awesome that you looked at that as like an opportunity rather than like, man, there's so many nations I got to customize the game for, and like pulling your hair. I like that you kind of spun it the other way. Like, man, I can really do a lot of stuff with this.
Oh yeah. You read 10 minutes of text and you get a ton of ideas, and history is really fascinating because sometimes you can't believe what you read. A fiction author will be accused of writing bullshit if he did. It's really fascinating. The kind of things that can happen in history. So yes, it's easy to find ideas. Now you need to find the good ideas that are not too complex and which make for a fun game mechanism. For example, you read about the Maurya Empire, and the Maurya Empire is not fully present on the map. The western part is on the map, and the east part is not on the map. And so you come with the idea, okay, they are not fully on the map. What can I do with that? Is it a drawback? Yes, it is. But can I do something fun with that? And then you think about a special kind of fortress, which is the communication door between the two empires. And it's and because of that, you have in-game a nation that can pull new units and stuff from the off-map part, and can reversely, when at peace, send units to this special building that will abstractly send them to the eastern part. And yes, it's very unique, and you repeat that for 20, 30 nations, and it takes time. And it means nation play very differently because of that. It's not just you are good in that, you get plus 10%. It should be different if you want to please and attract players trying your game, because people start to have seen everything now. So it's not the first game on ancient history. So yes, you need to be original. A fine balance between being original while not being totally going bunker.
Yeah, I haven't even played Mario, so that kind of adds it now as something interesting for me to look forward to.
Yes, the Adunarpa Fortress, I believe it's called. You will check it.
And speaking of which, they say that game developers hardly have time to play their own games. So my question for you is, how much time have you played your own game? At least probably a lot of playtesting, but since release, are you able to sit down and relax? And if you do play, do you have a favorite nation?
Yeah, I can't play like other players. It's impossible for me, and it has been like that since 15 years. When I start playing, I will spend 1 hour. I will play 10 minutes and then spend 2 hours in the code improving things I see and I dislike. It's horrible. So
very understandable.
Yeah. You see even a minor thing, or sometimes you see, and if I improve that will be even cooler. And so you start diving into your code, and in the end of the day, you have done 3 turns. But I did play for real, let's say, because I could not fiddle with the code. I did play some multiplayer game with the testers. Because when you are in a multiplayer, you can't change anything because it will invalidate the game. So I had to cope with what I did. I did enjoy Carthage the most. I very much like Carthage because they start spread thin. They have a region separated from others. So it means you need a good navy. I really like the money income they can generate. So it's Carthage drawback is that they don't have a lot of manpower, and but they have a lot of money. So you can mass recruit mercenaries to do a job, and then you will disband them. So I really like the you appear weak, but in fact it's because you have a small army, but you have probably 10 or 15,000 coin in the treasury. And so when somebody find search for trouble with you, you mass recruit mercenaries, and it's really fun.
It's funny that you say like this is a strategy game, and you distanced it a little bit from history, but I just want to make the comment that that's probably coming from a person who's exactly been making hardcore history games. That you just described one of the mechanics of actual historical Carthage, and the fact that you guys are able to like implement that into the game by just the game mechanics that work here, I think you might be selling yourself short. I really think the history in all of this and just the way the nations play. I don't want to bring up this mechanic or this comparison too much, but one of the complaints about Imperial Rome was that all the nations kind of feel like they play the same, and that's one of the things I would say that you can at least be proud of. That Field of Glory Empires, definitely every nation plays differently, and even just the one mechanic you just described.
Yeah,
I remember the first time I played Rome, I played one way, and then I tried to play the same way for even Ptolemy, which is not that different, but I still failed. And Ptolemy is an easy nation to play as, so it's because I was thinking like a Roman. So you guys have really done something there.
Yeah, because somehow you get reward when you do your historical research right, and you try to code and program the game mechanism. Somehow it falls into place naturally. It's nice to see that indeed you just program parameterize the Carthage to produce more money and less manpower, and so you know also that Carthage had a lot of mercenaries, so you add 5 unit types just for them for mercenaries, and yeah, it will play like history because the big parameters are set right. And I will say it's not that difficult. In fact, if you take some time, do your proper historical research, and then implement that properly, and then it falls on its feet somehow.
Well, I just want to mention my own favorite nation. I'm not sure if you're interested as much, but maybe people who are listening. And then, John, we're getting to you next, so start thinking about what yours is. I actually really like Pontus.
Oh.
I didn't discover it until later. I mean, it's the 4th or 5th nation I played as, and before that I played Rome, Carthage, and Ptolemy. But Pontus I really like because Rome you start small, which is nice, and you expand, so you have that whole feeling. But Rome it's a little bit too easy. I haven't played it on the harder difficulties, which would probably solve that problem.
Rome problem is later, because they get extra civil war. So it's easier start, and then you start to see bad things happening. But yeah.
Okay, so I haven't taken Rome far enough. I actually have. I started a new game as Rome because I didn't understand mechanics very well. So I'm kind of probably the same way you with programming is with me and gameplay. When I'm playing and I realize, I didn't understand this game mechanic. I've been doing things wrong for 5 turns. I just start over.
Okay. Rome is it lures you. You feel you are strong and everything goes right, and then 30 or 40 turns later, you start to see the pain they were into. So you should.
I see.
But you have to stick with from some 80 turns probably.
Okay, so I have to make sure I learn the mechanics really well so that I don't discover any new ones in these 80 turns, because otherwise, no, I can always force myself. So I like Pontus, though, because it's the same kind of start. You start small, you start surrounded by... Well, actually, Rome starts near people can conquer. Pontus only has a few... basically you're waiting for the Antigone Empire to fall apart.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah, they have so far in almost all of mine. But
I have seen some games where Antigonids have 1/3 of the map and start conquering Rome. So yeah.
Wow. But that's kind of cool because you do get a lot of different... Yeah, there's a lot of variety in the way the game will go.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen Seleucid do well in one. I've seen Macedonia do really well in another. Ptolemy actually moved in, took over all of Turkey in another game. So it's kind of very cool.
Yeah, you get some outcomes more often than not. Like it's obvious somehow that Macedonia do well many times or most of the time. And Seleucid will crumble at some point, but sometimes you get some strength or interesting situation, like the Seleucids that conquer up to Macedonia, this kind of stuff. It's amusing.
Yeah. So Jean, then what's your favorite nation to play as?
I kind of bank between Rome and Macedonia, actually. For some reason, I always choose Macedonia. Mainly because I would have to say I kind of want to restore Alexander's great empire. I was kind of want to see if I can redo what he did, and I never get a chance because from what I understand, well, every time I play it, I wouldn't say every time, but majority of the time I play it, I usually go at war within the first turn or two with a neighbor, and then another neighbor joins in a little later, and it becomes like a nice boxing match where I'm going to full 12 rounds. So it's it's one of those things, and I think a user commented that Macedonia is kind of in that spot where they have neighbors that kind of look at Macedonia as like a wounded deer ready for dinner, kind of thing. So, everybody's kind of wow, that's a quick meal right there, because Macedonia doesn't look like it has as strong of a military as some of its neighbors.
I mean, I would describe it as more like a wounded polar bear. It's still very vicious. So, at least in my own struggles against Macedonia, they have never given me an easy time. So, yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask was, do you have any future plans for Field of Glory Empires, with future DLCs and additional content for the game?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And I believe it's starting to become a public knowledge that the first big improvement will be on diplomacy. So,
that's good.
Yeah, because diplomacy, we knew when we released the game that it was, let's say, not the top-notch feature of the game, and we plan to improve on that as fast as possible. Yeah. And then, depending of success, DLC and we will have to decide what will be the content of it. We have ideas, but I can't tell you about them. But I can at least tell you about diplomacy.
So the Field of Glory Empires, you're still planning, at least for the near future, adding more content. Because the one thing I was kind of thinking was, since you made Field of Glory Empires with this brand new engine, I was salivating kind of what other time periods you kind of could visit, especially Civil War.
It's a very natural question. I'm very curious.
But what can I do? It's not even decided between ourselves. It's no, really, because when you decide of a subject, you just don't decide on the most interesting subjects. You also decide on the potential. Probably as AGEOD, it was fun to do a game on the Russian Revolution, but nobody, not nobody, but only a few thousands players did play it in the end. So it's you need to check the potential, and we probably all know what are the most attractive periods for the players, and Civil War is one of them. I can at least tell you that, and also the complexity of the project, because probably I can also safely tell you that the second game will not be on World War II, because it's just too much right now. We need to have a code base grow bigger and handle more stuff before even considering World War II. So, yeah, but we have not decided, in fact, about what will be the next topic.
I think it would be very funny if... I mean, I don't have a dog in the race. I think whatever you guys play, I will be interested in. I mean, whatever you guys make, I'll be interested to play. But it still would be kind of funny if only the French and Europeans, now that Slytherin's involved, were the ones making the good Civil War games. Yeah, there's definitely some irony in that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's really weird that, I don't care who does it. I just, I appreciate that it's there, So, I mean, during the 90s, my favorite American Revolution game was Liberty or Death, and that was made by a Japanese company. And now my favorite American Revolution game is by a French developer. So, it's kind of all over the world.
Yeah.
I just have one last question, and it's a question you're going to hate me for, but I got to ask, because I always ask this to the games that I really always think about. So I have a newborn, and I haven't been able to get to the computer as often as I would like. And it just kind of was, as I was feeding the baby, I was thinking, I have my tablet right in front of me, and it would be awesome to play Field of Glory Empires on my iPad. Is there any possibility that might happen in the future?
Philippe, just before you answer, just know that Matt, the other co-host, and myself roll our eyes as far back in our heads as we can at this question every time. That said, I actually am curious to your answer, because Field of Glory Empires may be more appropriate for an iPad than any other game that he's asked about this. So.
Yeah, it's also mostly a decision to be made by Slytherin, because I know they did some game Battle Academy on the iPad, but because of the extreme competition on the Apple Store, for example, and the difficulty to brand the game, it's always difficult to make to port a game which is still a bit grognard. So. I will not hold my breath on that. If you want a percentage, I will say 5% chance.
So there is a chance.
Actually,
always a chance.
You're saying
roll a 1 on your die.
That's right.
I'm gonna cross my fingers.
Yeah, also, but you can do anything then. Yeah, don't. Yeah.
So unlikely at best.
Yeah, unlikely.
Okay.
Very unlikely. Still possible in an alternate reality.
Very good.
So that's all the questions that I have. So, Eric, do you have any other ones that you wanted to other topics you want to touch base on?
No, I think the last question we usually ask, we haven't asked that. It's early in the morning, but this is the Single Malt Strategy podcast. Emphasis right now on single malt. So perhaps you're not drinking any alcohol this early, but do you have any single malt that you enjoy, or any beverage that you're enjoying right now, or just some kind of random aside we add to the end of these podcasts?
Oh, well, aside coffee? No special
I'm in your boat too,
beverage.
and I'm having black coffee.
Yeah, so how do you take your coffee then?
I take 2 mugs on the morning. Is it the question? I'm not too sure, in fact.
Sure. Is it black or do you like cream?
Yeah,
Sure.
black with
espresso.
some milk.
You guys in Europe, you guys like espresso. A lot of espresso.
Black coffee with some milk and some how you say fake sugar, stevia sugar. Just to keep my weight in check.
We got to call this the Freshly Brewed Coffee Podcast.
Yeah. Hey, no, actually, I have one today.
Oh.
But let's ask what yours is, Sean.
I got the same thing as Felipe. I have just black coffee, and I've been kind of like taking it easy on the drinking front because literally I'm up, I would say, most of day and night, so there's not really much time to kind of like sit back and enjoy.
Well, for me tonight, I am able to enjoy some Remy Martin XO cognac.
Oh, fancy!
It's very nice. It's quite nice.
Oh,
You
Yes.
are in for a good night then after.
I'm gonna sleep like a baby.
I'm not in. More importantly, I'm not in for a good morning, which has to begin very soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, sleep is overrated.
Yeah, so I've discovered, but it's not. But it may be overrated, but it's still necessary.
Yeah, true.
All right, so that does it for this podcast. Thank you for both, especially Felipe, for coming in. I really appreciate you coming in and joining us for this podcast. I really love all the games that you make. I really just, my two favorite games of all time, American Revolution and Civil War, you guys make the best one. So, I love all your games. So thank you for coming on the show. And
thank you very much, guys, also. It was very nice.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, a real pleasure.
We'll see you guys on the other side. See you then.
Yeah, okay.